Um, hello, or actually, maybe I should say, hello, Witchfest. Oh, I've always wanted to do that. With my apologies to Merlin. You see, we should be all together. We should be at Witchfest and Witchfest Midlands and Artemis Gathering and doing all of this in person. But the circumstances have fallen a bit strangely. So my name's actually Mortimer, and it's great to see you all. Not that I can see you. It's rather strange, actually, talking to just to a camera and no audience to feed back to me. But maybe there'll be fewer bottles thrown and things like that, so that's probably a good thing. You'll also be pleased to know that the talk that I'm going to give you about Wicca and Witchcraft is going to be a little shorter than normal. It's unfortunately just to counterbalance that, we're going to listen to some music, but we'll talk about that later. So, will you do this? And I said, yes, of course I will. I don't really know what to do. I don't really know how to get to this because my talk's so long, and as you know, I'm a person of loose character, which means I get distracted easily and I get passionate and caught up, and when I do that, we get diverted. So if I start talking about the origins of Wicca, then we get lost in the history. And I started about the beginning of human civilization, which is where you've got to start. And I could get up to about the building of Stonehenge and run out of time. In fact, actually, hey, maybe that's what happened at Stonehenge. Maybe that's why it was the way it was, because somebody from Children of Artemis was stood at the side of them with a watch going, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Wicca. I'd like to get into my take on it, but I do need to look at the history. And I figured that if I was going to give a short talk, then we could do something, start in the present and work backwards. And I thought, see, I'm strategic like that. I thought, if we did that, then maybe wherever we stopped and wherever I got rambled to, it would still be natural because I would have still been able to talk about paganism and Wicca and the craft today. So what we've got, as is demonstrated by this, is a pagan community. We've got a society that's accepting of us as pagans and witches, and I mean largely accepting. Certainly compared to what it used to be, and even in my day, and I've been around a little bit now, but even in my day, people were trepidatious about describing their paganism to their employers or even to their family. I think that's still the case in some places, but certainly going further back still, newspapers were exposing witches, and you kept very secretive about it. And further back still, you could be arrested or burned or hanged in this country. So things have not always been this way. And what shaped our society and our community like this? Well, obviously people getting outward from within paganism to present it in a way that became more palatable to society, and also society shifting morals. I think things really changed in a big way in the 1970s. It was in the 70s that there were a proliferation of books and information and accessibility to occult and pagan subjects that wasn't there before. And with regard to Wicca, or the craft, there were writers like Doreen Valiente, Janet Stewart Farrar, Vivian Crowley, and then slightly outwardly, equally influential, people like Starhawk, and I probably missed a few. But this access to this, and of course the other thing that happened was that the formation, again with Doreen Valiente involved, was the formation of things like the Pagan Federation and then the Children of Artemis and other organisations that then represented pagans outwardly to the rest of the society. Now, Doreen says that came from a growing current that was present in the 1960s. In the 60s, people, and culturally across the world, particularly in America, with the flower power and hippie movements and New Age and free love, people were experimenting with psychedelic drugs and psychedelic music and psychedelic religion, I guess, and sex and all sorts of freedoms that the 50s had kind of suppressed within them. She says that the craft, that the notion of an alternative spirituality, a goddess-based spirituality that was a little bit risque and a bit edgy, or perceived as such, was very appealing, and it found fertile ground, which indeed it did. Now, I think that our pagan society would have a different complexion today had paganism, and particularly the craft, not taken hold in America the way it did. If you're going to credit any one person, and it's possible that you could do so, then it's a guy called Raymond Buckland, who was a Scottish initiate from a coven in Perth. And he took it spread like wildfire. Now, if you get just a little bit further back through the 1960s, and of course Gerald Gardner, who is known as the father of modern witchcraft and the Wicca, he passed away in '64. He was very active in stirring things up. In fact, Gerald Gardner is probably one of the most central figures in the development of our modern pagan society. Now, I should just stop here for a moment and explain that I don't want you to get the impression from me that Wicca is the only game in town. There were far, far wider community of occultists and pagans and people interested in alternative religions and spiritualities and the like, other than the Wicca. However, it is true to say that Wicca and the story of Gerald Gardner is right at the heart of what happened. So if I'm zooming in and being a bit Gerald-centric, perhaps you'll forgive me. I don't really, I'm not so kind of narrow-minded that I think there wasn't anything else going on. It's just that I know a bit more about Gardner and the craft than the other things. Gardner's story is a long one. Takes a while to tell. Perhaps one of my fun 4.5-hour lectures on the subject would be good. You'd probably be better off with Philip Heselton, who's a better speaker than me on the subject, and he certainly knows a lot more than I do. Gardner has an interesting story because I think a lot of it stems from his childhood. But it's really when he's an older man, when he retires in his 50s, and he comes to live in Britain in 1936. For a little while, moves down to the south coast to a place called Highcliffe in Hampshire, near Christchurch, on the edge of the New Forest. Gets involved with a local amateur dramatics group and gets excited because he thinks he recognises something that they're doing, some form of paganism that they're engaging in. He thinks he's recognised the surviving cell of what he knows as the witch cult of Western Europe. Now, that was the title of a book by an historian called Margaret Murray. Margaret Murray's been somewhat rubbished for some of her historical research since then, with some justification, I must say. However, at the time, she was the world authority on witchcraft. She wrote the Encyclopaedia Britannica entry on it. So Gardner had no reason to suppose that Murray and her theory that pockets of a witch cult had survived throughout Europe from pre-Christian times. Gardner went one step further. I mean, he wanted that to be the case. He was excited, I think. I think he was enthusiastic. I think he thought that he'd found not only his own religion, a religion that was suitable for him, but an ancestral thing that was part of British culture. He was quite proud of being British, quite a sense of Britishness. And I think he really just wanted that to be the case. So he did go a little bit further, and I think in some cases he certainly knowingly purported that there'd been a continuance of practice through generations, which his subsequent historians have not been able to trace or prove. I think he's probably accepted that Gerald embellished. The other thing he did was he did not make it all up. You're probably aware that there is a book of shadows. That's a term Gardner himself coined, which those initiates, those who have been initiated into the Wicca, and I keep saying the Wicca because the Wicca is a collective. I'm a Wicca, he's a Wicca, she's a Wicca, we are the Wicca. 1C as well, by the way. Gardner took something that he found and ran with it and embellished it with the things that he knew were part of something else. He was knowledgeable about Freemasonry, extremely knowledgeable about ritual magic, high magic. He was a student of earlier magical societies and occult lodges. It would be wrong to talk about the origins of the Wicca without mentioning Aleister Crowley. Gardner knew quite a lot about that, more, I think, than people have said. In fact, I know from some of the stuff that I did on my initiatory journey and some of the writings of Gerald's that I've been exposed to, demonstrate to me that he actually knew what the heck he was doing. He really did. Because what he'd done is he'd worked out that there was a kind of a conjoining of force and form of two, not opposites, but of something ecstatic and intuitive, something beautiful and stirring, that involved creativity and imagination, and that it would have collapsed in on itself like a jelly had it not had the backbone that he started to give it of a more intellectualized, scientific, understood approach to magic and the state of the universe that came from, in fact, those Victorian or late Victorian occult lodges and occult societies. The knowledge of subjects like Hermeticism, the Kabbalah, alchemy. These people had translated older texts. Okay, again, things get lost in translation or changed. But they had developed systems, and Crowley particularly had written an awful lot about topics like the tarot and everything to do with occultism that had given Gardner a background and an understanding that he could then, I think, insert into this ecstatic thing that he'd found. Now, some people have accused the Wicca and Gardner's rituals of being a kind of ritual magic light, Fisher-Price occultism. I don't think that's fair. I really don't think that's fair, because what Gardner's produced and what the craft became after that was far from an oversimplification. It was a very clever condensation. It had a continuity within it that worked. Now, I went through that path of initiatory training, and I've been around a bit since then as well and learned a few things and experienced some stuff. And what really was joyful to me was to discover that Gardner had similar experiences. He found that pleasure in seeing that the two apparently non-joining subjects melded together really well. It was like a skeleton of occultism inside the flesh of ecstatic paganism. And it worked. It does work. I started out reading those books from the 70s and trying to do magic. And as a teenager, I was experimenting with things. I think I had some effects. I had some things happen. Pretty startling, actually. But really, I was happier out there in the woods, climbing a tree, getting muddy, skinning my knees, that sort of thing. And for years, the two sort of sat within parts of my life. It wasn't really until the craft and until my initiation and my training that it kind of all fell together. And I thought, oh, that's in that, and that one's in that, the yin and the yang. The yin and the yang symbol, as you know, each side, the white and the black, contains the seed of the other. And this is what was going on. This microcosm, this internalization, this intellectualization. They're coming for me again. Fitted with this ecstatic, imaginative side. And it was a delight. And Gardner knew that. He wrote about it, in fact. So, for me, the Wicca and my journey through initiation, it wasn't about learning pentagrams and swords and ritual magic. Yeah, I had to learn that. I got part involved in that and got an understanding of that. But it was about me. It was about basically taking a good hard look at myself. Because once you know where you are, the occult principle is that to know the universe, one must know oneself. And the best way you can know yourself is be truthful with yourself. And that ain't very easy. And that leads us to these times where, sitting in our isolation, as we are, it's the sort of period where it leads to a potential introspection. This is a really great time to push yourself along that journey of self-discovery. I want to say that Wicca, for me, brought me to life in a way. It gave me an understanding that there were two parts and that they fitted together. And that what had been an impenetrable mystery of occultism now wasn't. And what had been an impenetrable mystery of ecstatic paganism still was. Wow, I think I've just done a soundbite, a quote, there you go. But that's what happened. And it was great that Gardner discovered that too. And it's no wonder that it expanded and grew and that people continue to develop that. And I see that around. And it's in times like this where we can look back at ourselves, we can introvert again, and we can take stock and do what occultists and those of the Wicca will be doing now, and taking a good look at ourselves, stripping off some of the gubbins, some of the psyche that we don't need. I've got a very, very, very knowledgeable friend in the craft who who, if she were to write a book on the craft, she would probably entitle it, "Ah, you don't need all that shit." To an expression of microcosm, macrocosm, force and form, understanding and intuition. There's a strange thing, because I said that we were going to have some music. I'm going to premiere the video that I've been making while I've been sitting here in quarantine on my own. And I've chosen a song that really requires some explanation anyway, not least because it's 17 minutes long. I mean, that is 17 minutes of your life you're not going to get back. So be prepared. Set forth and to do so without fear in your heart. Now, it needs also to be described as the story of why and where it comes from. So there was a TV series in Britain in the 60s called The Prisoner, and it starred a man called Patrick McGoohan, who also wrote the story, actually. And the story was of a secret agent who, having decided he wanted to retire from secret agenting, discovered that one does not simply retire from secret agenting. And he wakes up in this controlled place where he begins, he's overseen by the sinister and mysterious controlling superiors. He's given a number, not a name, and he's told that he now lives in the village. And he's not able to escape. And it's about his own journey of self-discovery. It's about his realization that by looking into himself, he can figure out the mechanism and means to defeat, the psychology that's being manipulated upon him. In 1969, named Roy Harper. And Roy was writing a song that was inspired by and makes reference in the lyrics to bits that were happening in The Prisoner. In fact, he named the song after the actor Patrick McGoohan, and the song is called Goons Blues. A long section of Being Roy, 8 verses of study and analysis of the world around, the macrocosm without. And then it kind of goes through a little tunnel of a bridge section to find that inside, in the microcosm of the self, is this ecstatic and amazing and incredible and bursting out natural pagan life. Some of the bits there are joyful. Now, many of you know of Sarah Kay. Sarah was the love of my life, is the love of my life, and she passed away tragically in January 2019. And on, I must say, Sarah had bought us tickets to go and see Roy Harper on what was going to be his farewell tour. It was announced that he was going to perform the Goons Blues for the first time in many years. So it was quite exciting. And Roy and Roy's manager called me up and said, look, we know what's happened. If you and Sarah were going to come to the show, please still come, and we'll make sure you're welcomed and take care of you and stuff. And in fact, they did, and we hung out a little while, and we did some talking about stuff, about life and death and Sarah, and about Goons Blues. And Roy said he felt that, he wanted to perform it again because it was still relevant. So he wasn't too sure that he still is. The song, after 50 years, still has stuff in it that catches. And I don't just mean the analysis of the people around the society, because they're still there, the pinstripe sardine cum magician and the luminous green prima donna and all these other characters, but also the introspective. It's right there and I said to him, this is the study of Wicca, This is the psychology of Wicca, this understanding of these topics, of the constant things like the mirror that one must look through and not see the reflection, but see what's through it. And the doorway to duck into, where we hide in our flesh for an incarnation. And of course the river that continues to flow, because that's the thing, that the way that one maintains a healthy psychology and a self-developed, self-actualized, self-realized personality is by letting go of stuff and understanding that there really is only this moment to live in, the here and the now. So hearing my musical hero telling me directly that's what he believed was quite exciting. He said, I've been writing songs all my life to explain to people that this is it. This one chance that we have in this universe of chance. There's only today. It was good. I said to him, you know, you've got some craft in your song. And we talked a little bit about that, and he was kind of, hey, that's cool. I did know that, but you know, I don't think he was aware that it was specifically that way. So that's why there's a relevance. So I guess you can watch out for the witchy hook lines and the little concepts and see if you can see something a bit deeper in there. I'm certainly thinking it while I'm performing. And on that subject, I should just finally say that that I was invited to perform at Artemis, and I wish we were all sat around a campfire doing it. But sitting in isolation, I figured I would hone some new skills. So I've purloined the iPhone camera, which isn't, you know, professional video recording equipment, and I've used iMovie and GarageBand, and I think come up with something that maybe does it justice. I should just say the performance was one take. It really was just one take. Turn it all on and do it. Didn't stop. Ashley Mortimer, and see whether you enjoy or appreciate or whatever the thing. And I can sit back and enjoy it with you, knowing that we are connected in our community and that our hearts and our spirit are present within each other's. And best of all, that if you throw bottles and cans at me, you can't touch me.
Beware, Pixie.
I'll be seeing you.
Nicky, my child, he stands there with the wind in his hair, wondering whether the water, the wind, or the where. I fear that someday he might ask me if mine is the blame, and I'll have no reply save to tell him it's all just a game. And Heather and I lay together when I was in love. She weighed up the gains and the losses and gave me the shove. The fear of mankind's untogetherness pounds in my heart. The deceit of my friends, the betrayals of which I am part. And aha, the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind. To see my 2 feet standing here, questioning, and I'm just a social experiment tailored to size. I've tried out the national machine and the welfare surprise, and the rich man, the poor man, the peace man, the war man, the beast, and the festive consumer who ends up consumed in the feast. And my five-eyed promoter is clutching 2 birds in the bush. He's a thief, he's as bad as the Joker, they're both in the rush. He's telling me Gandhi was handy and geez, sold his ring. Don't know who to. God maybe? And everyone knows that this dough gonna make me the king. And aha, the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind. To see my 2 feet standing here, questioning, and meanwhile the ticket collectors are punching their holes. into your memories, your journeys, and into your souls. Your life sentence starts and the judge hands you down a spare wig, saying get out of that and goodbye old boy, have a good gig. And the town label makers stare down with their gallery eyes and point with computer-stained fingers each time you arise to the rules and the codes of the system that keeps them in chains, which is where they belong, with no poems, no love, and no brains. And aha, the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind to see my 2 feet standing here, questioning. Meanwhile, the TV commercials are sweeping the day, brainwashing innocent kids into thinking their way. The wet politicians and clergymen have much to say, defending desires of the sheep they are leading astray. And Ma's favourite pop star is forcing a grin. He's a smash! Obliging the soft-headed viewers to act just as flash. The village TV hooks its victims on giveaway cash. Its addicts are numbers who serve to perpetuate trash. And aha, the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind to see my stupid poetry shuffling. The bankers and tycoons and hoarders of money and art fill up with baubles and Bibles and full of no heart, who travel first class on a pleasure excursion to fame, are the eyes that are guiding society's ludicrous aim. And the village is making its Sunday collection in church. The church warbles twixt hell and heaven's crumbling perch. Unnoticed, the money box loudly endorses the shame, as the world that Christ fought is supported by using his name. And aha, the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind to see my stupid poetry bubbling. Pinstriped sardine come magician is packed in his train, censoring all of the censorship filling his brain. He stares through his armor-plate vision and says, insane. The prisoner is taking his shoes off to dance in the rain, and the luminous green prima donna is sniffing the sky. She daren't tread the earth that she's smelling, her birth was too high. Her bank balance castle is built on opinion and fear, which is all she allows within 300 miles of her ear. And aha, the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind to see my stupid poetry bubbling. And I've seen all your pedestal values, your good and your bad, If you really believe them, your passing is gonna be hard. And I've thought, and I know that it's blind, silly season occurs when our reasoning is trying to fathom a reason. But if you really know it's all a joke, but you're just putting me on, well, it's sure a good act that you've got, 'cause you've never let on. But if all of that super sale overkill world is for real, then you've nowhere to go, kids, so you might as well start to freewheel. And ah, the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind, to see my 2 feet standing here burbling. And I had this dream in here same time as standing a week. These various visions rushed by as I giggled and quaked. The distant guns thunder my end, and I duck for a while. Auntie Lily is handing me candy, she chuckles, I smile. And our village is where I was born, and it's where I will die. And I'll never be able to leave it, whatever I try. And the ebb and the flow of the forces of life pass me by, which is all that I'll know from my birth till my last gasping sigh. And on the sea she roars with laughter and howls with the dancing wind, to see the dying lying there, obey. My age and my time, the blood fire, wine and rhyme, it fills my dreams, reminds me of an atom in a bubble on a wave that held its breath for 1 sweet second, then was popped and disappeared into fruitful futility, meaningless meaning. Down by the toadstool lovers, under the dream, everything flowing over, rainbows downstream, silver the turning water, flying away. I'll come and see you, Sarah, and I'm on my way. There's a mirror that I'm looking straight through, and I get it, and the doorway that we're ducking into, to forget it. But flashing just beyond the sky, the shattering midnight gathers, reminding us behind our eyes, the earth quakes, the sunflake flutters. over the mountain fairground, candy floss days, under the moonshine fountain, I'm on my way. Lemon tree blossom onesies, pouring my tea, afternoon roll-right picnics following me. There's a river that we're still making it with, and we know it, and we're floating till we don't care where, we're just going, but flashing just beyond the sky, the shattering midnight gathers, reminding us behind our eyes, the earth quakes, the sunflake flutters. Daffodil, April petal, hiding the game, forests of restless chessmen, life is the same. Tides in the sand, sun lovers, watching us dream, circled in stars and clover, rainbows downstream. And the question in the great big underneath is forever, and the fanfare that we're forcing through our teeth answers never, but flashing just beyond the sky, the shattering midnight gathers, reminding us behind our eyes, the earth quakes, the sunflake flutters. The earth quakes, the sunflake flutters. The pumpkin coach and rags approach, and the wind is devouring her ashes.